baseball-printed curtains swayed in the suburban evening breeze. The open window let in the sounds of bored, barking dogs, the fresh, cool air, and hopefully soon, one of the most elusive creatures known to man. Jackson Curtis was strong-willed, sharp, and curious. He was also one of the last sixth graders at his school to lose all of their baby teeth. Earlier that day, he took a hit from a dodgeball right to the face on the playground. He reached into his mouth and gingerly pulled out a pearly, jagged tooth. He couldn't contain his excitement. While his classmates were disturbed by his jubilation, Jackson knew he was just granted the perfect bait for his next great pursuit. Although it was something the other kids poked fun at him for, Jackson saw it as an opportunity to do something no one else in the world had. He was going to catch the Tooth Fairy. Now that he had what he needed to lure her straight to him, he needed to set the perfect trap. His parents were made aware of the covert operation, and they humored him by promising privacy and their full cooperation. He spent all afternoon devising the plan, and he finished up just as the night fell. He grabbed his flashlight, candy, and his prized Polaroid camera. Taking his position on the closet floor behind its nearly closed door, he began his quiet watch for any sign of the fairy in the flesh. Next to him, he dumped out his cache of sugary treats to keep him up all night, and the wrappers piled up as the hours went by. He was worried she might not show. Maybe she was more clever than he realized. Just as he was about to call it a night, Jackson finally saw something. Through the slim opening of his closet door, he saw a long shadow sweep over the floor of his bedroom. He couldn't hear any footsteps or the beating of tiny wings as he anticipated. He crept closer to the door and closed one eye to focus the other as he peered out into the dimly lit room. Suddenly, he got visual confirmation. She glided into his line of sight, and he reared back away from the door in terror. The fairy wasn't at all what he expected. She was at least 8 feet tall as her head nearly touched the ceiling. She had large, black, monstrous wings that spanned half of the room, though they didn't flutter or keep her afloat. She seemed to levitate altogether. Her bony bare feet dragged lightly across Jackson's hardwood floors, and the scraping unnerved him. As she entered the warm glow of his nightlight, he noticed the luminous, shimmering green hue of her face. A fine, blue, sparkling mist surrounded her, collecting inside of her skeletal body cavities and expelling from her wings in an endless cycle. Every time she moved or twisted, her bony joints creaked and popped. Her long, bat-like ears protruded out and away from her head, and on top of that head was long, black, coarse feather-like hair. Her teeth were small, sharp, and fanged, and her tongue flicked devilishly behind them. From her wide mouth, dark red stringy fluid dribbled down her chin and leaked onto her rough, spiky body below. The crimson goo spilled across the porous landscape of her bones and seemed to leach and disappear somewhere inside of her. It was like she was wearing a suit of burnt white armor. From what would she need all this protection, Jackson wondered. But she was there, slinking around the corners of his room, sniffing and lapping at the air with her red-stained tongue. There was only one thing she could have been trying to find: the delicate tooth waiting for her underneath his pillow. Jackson hoped his decoy basketball head would fool the giant fairy. As terrified as he was, he couldn't abort the mission. He was going to catch her no matter what. She extended her bony hand toward the bed, salivating. What does she do with all the teeth anyhow, Jackson wondered to himself. But he had to stay focused and ask questions later. She slipped her crackling hand under the pillow with a grace so supernatural that it didn't disturb the covers or the wig-covered basketball. She seemed to have found what she was looking for, but her head suddenly tilted to the side, seemingly suspicious of something. Had she heard him? Jackson imagined her long ears probably had impeccable hearing. He had to be quick and silent. He gathered his camera and flashlight and prepared to ambush the ancient creature. But when he looked back out into the bedroom, he couldn't see her. How could he have lost sight of such a massive monster so quickly? He feared she had already done her business and left as quietly as she came.
You are supposed to be sleeping, little boy.
A guttural swarm of words flowed out from somewhere in the room. The voice sounded neither young nor old, neither living nor dead. It was like the piercing, resonant shriek of a raven. Jackson resisted the urge to shout for his mom and dad in the other room. He had to be brave. He had to finish the mission and prove to those kids at school that she was real. Armed with his camera, flashlight, and heaps of sugar coursing through his veins, he defiantly emerged from the closet. His slippered feet stumbled clumsily toward the center of his bedroom. He looked around, trying to locate the looming aberration. Then he hears her, right behind him. Her serrated teeth chattered in his ears. Dust and debris flung from her blood-caked mouth and landed right on top of his head like a macabre flurry of bone snow. Her powerful jaw pulverizes his last baby tooth into powder.
"And why are you out of bed, my dear clever one?"
she asks, menacing and direct. Jackson turns slowly to look up and face her. Her smile matures into a sadistic, hungry grin as she awaits his answer. Her unblinking, glowing white eyes petrified the poor boy. But he's somehow able to reply.
I wanted to know if you were real. If you really take our teeth at night. The kids at school think I'm a baby for still believing in the tooth fairy. I just wanted some kind of proof.
The tooth fairy? Is that what children call us?
She laughs to herself under her breath.
Yeah, I mean, you take our baby teeth, don't you?
Jackson questions, becoming less and less afraid.
We take all of your bones when you haven't need of them anymore. And when you die, we'll take you whole, my boy.
Her casually fiendish smile slashes at his psyche, and his courage begins to wane. Jackson chokes on his next breath. He drops his flashlight, which clatters loudly on the ground, and rolls away.
What do you mean, we?
Jackson asks with a pinch in his throat. He slowly backs up toward the open window.
We have many names.
The monster continues, slowly gliding toward him as he retreats.
The Banshee, the Raven Mocker, and now, the Tooth Fairy. Stay vigilant, my clever one. This meager offering of your teeny tooth may satiate me for the night, but we will return for a proper feast if you're not careful.
Jackson knew it was now or never. He lifts his Polaroid camera in front of him, pointing up as best as he can towards her. He presses the shutter button, and the flash dazzles him as it illuminates the entire room for a moment. As his eyes readjust to the dark, he finds he's all alone in the room. Without a sound, the gargantuan crunching bone woman had left him with more questions than answers. Removing his decoy basketball head from his pillow, he reclines in bed and excitedly waves the slowly developing photo in the air. He turns on his bedside lamp, making sure to check the corners of the room for any evidence that the tooth fairy may have left behind. Finally, he was able to make out the features of the portrait he took. He's looking right into the ominous eyes of the baseball player in the poster that was on the wall, just behind the tooth fairy. Jackson should have known she couldn't be photographed.
Ah, man.
Crestfallen, he tosses the photo away from him, his tongue jabbed at the socket where his tooth used to be. One of the last hallmarks of his youth had just been eviscerated right in front of him. And what did he have to show for it? He reached for the lamp just before something caught his eye at the window.
Wait, what's that?
It was swirling and flapping in the breeze. Jackson hopped out of bed and crept towards it. A huge punctured smile widened across his face and his eyebrows raised high upon his forehead. An enormous black feather was trapped in the windowsill. The beast had left it behind for him to show his friends as proof that he had almost caught the tooth fairy.
Now go to bed, boy.